This train terminates at Sherrowford. Alighting passengers, don't forget your luggage. Mind the gap between the carriage and the platform. 7 pairs of feet scuffed and stumbled on the familiar wooden floor of Evelyn's workshop, as reality swelled and fattened around our senses like a dry sponge soaked in swamp water. Human smells and human sights, and blessed be, thank God, thank Maisie and the eye and anything else that cared to listen human scale. Kimberly bolted up from the sofa in a clatter of books and papers falling from her lap. Rain's hand squeezed mine too hard, clammy and cold and clinging. Somebody groaned like they'd been gut-punched. Lozzie was the only one giggling at her own joke. She wriggled free from our circle of hard-grip safe passage. The engine of our split-second journey home skipped across the workshop and did a perfect, fluttering curtsy with the hem of her poncho. And the local time is dash. With a playful smirk and a toss of her braid and a sideways roll of heavy-lidded eyes, Lozzie threw the rest of the line to Kimberly. Lauren, I think, Kimberly stammered. I think everyone needs help. She wasn't wrong. We'd taken the return slip for granted. Lozzie was supposed to tap her heels together and whisk us all back to normality and drizzling rain and a hastily ordered takeaway dinner. Like stumbling in from a storm to the radiators turned up full and the smell of cooking on the stove top and a warm hug to welcome you home. More fool us. Lozzie and I could slip with impunity, but neither of us were fully human anymore. Had I been human at all, since the day the I took my sister and I? For human minds are trying to be human minds, unprepared by prior experience or cushioned by the spiritual calluses of hyperdimensional mathematics, the translation across the membrane from outside was, to put it lightly, an unkind experience. At least I'd shouted for everyone to close their eyes. Our circle of shoulder-to-shoulder hand-holding solidarity fell apart literally, in Zheng's case. As Lozzie finished her little joke, the giant demon host lost her grip on Rain's shoulder and toppled over like a felled tree. She sat on the floor in a great heap, shaking her head as if trying to clear a cloud of flies. Twill bent double, squeezed her eyes shut, and came audibly close to losing the contents of her stomach. She whined, high-pitched and pitiful, more hound than human, shaking hard as if she'd been plunged into ice water. Rain appeared to fare better, but appearances didn't last. She ripped her hand out of mine, dropped her makeshift shield with a clang, and tore her heavy motorcycle jacket off her shoulders as if it was on fire. She flung it down after the shield, shuddering all over, her t-shirt beneath soaked through with cold sweat. I reached for her but she held up a hand to ward off any touch at all, closing her eyes and forcing slow, deep breaths. Preem and Evelyn were almost okay. They'd both been through a slip before, Evelyn while terrified and exhausted, but Preem dropped the sports bag and the rest of our expedition equipment in a great clatter on the floor, then stood stock-still, staring at her own hands. She hadn't suffered so when I'd slipped the pair of us to Carcosa and back before. Was Lozzie's technique so much worse? Meanwhile, Evelyn's face turned a most fascinating shade of rotten grey-green. She stumbled back and fell into a chair, grunting in pain and flinching at the hip, then put both hands on the handle of her walking stick and lowered her forehead to rest against her knuckles. And me? Well, I was an old hand at transdimensional re-entry. Despite the dragging exhaustion of 2 rounds of aborted brain math, I should have leapt into action. I should have fetched chocolate and water, should have helped Twill up when she sat down in a heap and groaned like she wanted to be sick, should have checked that Zheng was actually still alive, should have patted Evelyn on the back and spoken to her. The show must go on, Saldies had said, before we'd left. Instead, shuddering and shaking and still bloody in the face, I tried to look everywhere at once, and prayed I would not spy a scrap of hidden yellow. Oh, goddess, what dash, Kimberly stammered. What happened, what dash? Rain dash, I clutched for her arm. Are you dash? No, it's all right, back in a sec, Rain said, and then went into the kitchen to be loudly sick into the sink. Bless her, even after vomiting up cereal bars and energy drink, caked in her own cold sweat with her t-shirt clinging to her, she returned with water and tissues, to help clean the rest of the blood off my face. We need Chocolate, right? That's the trick for this feeling. Yeah. Rain roused herself further, as Kimberly flapped about and Lozzie blinked at everyone as if she didn't understand why we were hurting. Everyone alright, yeah. All accounted for. A chorus of grunts, grumbles, and one soft, present, from Preem. Left hand, you stroked out or what? Rain asked. Here, Yashu, Zheng rumbled, eyes shut. Oh no, Lozzie was biting her lip as we all fell about like a bunch of hungover college students. I thought I did it proper. I thought I did it right. You did, I croaked, clinging to Rain with one claw-like hand. Sakai. 'S not your fault. Can we come back by gate next time? Twill burbled. We spent almost 10 minutes just sitting around, trying to feel normal again. Kimberly and Lozzie pitched in to fetch painkillers, water for everyone, and at Evelyn's mumbled suggestion chocolate. Lozzie spent several minutes almost literally clambering over Zheng to check she was still working, still here, not suffering some sort of body-soul disconnection. Rain made sure I wasn't about to fall over or pass out, then helped peel the shuddering, sweat-soaked werewolf out of her coat and hoodie, Twill huffing and puffing all the while. "Get off dash," Twill eventually grumbled, shaking off the help once she was down to her t-shirt, hints of her dark tattoos visible just under the lilac hem. She staggered to her feet and cast around the room, gums peeled back, too many sharp teeth in her mouth, transformation bristling as half-dismissed mist of fur and claw. "Whoa, Twill?" Rain asked, hands up. I swallowed. I don't know. I haven't seen anything yet. She was lying, Evelyn croaked. Twill blinked at her. So did I. The woman, the mage, Evelyn explained with a heavy sigh. When she raised her face from her knuckles, she looked exhausted, drained, done, very small in her coat with overflowing pockets. Saldies. She was lying. Yeah. Cool, okay, Twill said between panting breaths. What if you're wrong? What if something followed us back? What if something piggybacked on Heather? On you? Evie, that thing was reaching for you and you want me to calm dash. There's nothing here but us, Evelyn said. Are you certain? I whispered, and meant, please be right. Rain must have heard the tone in my voice, because despite her own slow recovery, she dumped Twill's coat and hoodie on the floor, and returned to put her arm around my shoulders. How can you know for sure? Twill was saying, outraged. How can you dash? There are 2 Spider-Servitors in this very room, Evelyn said, with grinding certainty. I could tell she was trying to calm herself first and foremost. Programmed to take apart anything which shouldn't be in here. This entire house is one of the most heavily warded locations in the whole of England, wards laid down by my grandmother. Nothing has followed us. Nothing is here. If it was, I would know, it would be like the alarms going off in a nuclear reactor. Unless it's literally an invisible ghost, and to the best of my knowledge there is no such thing as ghosts. She spat the last word. Heather, do you see anything? I shook my head. Lozzie piped up too, nothing but us. All of us, though. Evelyn's eyes flickered to the gate, still standing open in the center of the mandala on the far wall. The dark doorway still showed the vast shadows and humped book drifts of Carcosa's canyon floor. Preem, get that closed. Right now. Preem did not respond. She was still staring at her own hands. Preem. Evelyn frowned up at her. Preem, are you okay? I asked. No, Preem intoned. But she lowered her hands and obeyed, marching over to the gate and peeling away one of the additional stuck-on parts of paper and masking tape. The gateway collapsed back into bare plaster wall, and outside stayed outside. Then Preem turned and marched back to Evelyn's shoulder, and in a gesture I'd never seen from her before, she smoothed the skirt of her maid uniform over her thighs and backside. Though perfectly wrinkle-free, she did it again, and then a third time, mechanical and precise. Evelyn watched her with mounting concern. Stop that. Preem, stop. Preem did it again. You did well, Evelyn said, with no little difficulty. Thank you. Preem, what's wrong? I asked. Preem smoothed her skirt again. Evelyn grabbed one of her hands before she could start the gesture a sixth time. Preem's head twitched to gaze down at her mistress with blank milk-white eyes. Thank you, Evelyn repeated. You and I need to talk, and I need to feed you a box of strawberries. Yes. Yes, Preem intoned, and finally stilled. Twill turned to me. Heather, you don't see anything? For real? I nodded. Just us, I croaked. No ghosts, yellow or otherwise, really. I suspect I'd be screaming, otherwise. Twill peered about the room again, as if she might find a figure in yellow robes hiding behind the sofa or beneath the table. Despite my exhaustion and brain math pain and even the very words I'd said to reassure her, I found myself following along with her gaze. Could I spy a crack in the backing boards of the stage scenery? Would I spot a prop out of place? Was an actor standing in the wrong position? I blinked rapidly. Shuddered, and tried to stop thinking like that. Heather. Rain murmured my name. Just gave myself the creeps, I said. That's all. But Saldy said dash. The Mage's words cannot be trusted, Evelyn huffed. And Twill, will you sit down? You're giving me a headache. Warn us. Evelyn raised her voice with mocking scorn. That thing we just spoke to was far more dangerous than anything which might have followed us home. Her words may as well have been nonsense. And please don't make me shout over you, I'm going to be sick. I'm not making you shout, Twill muttered, eyes down and away. Evie, go easy on her, Rain said. We're all wiped out. She wanted us to stay in the library, for some reason on which I do not wish to speculate, Evelyn carried on, heedless to how she'd just hurt Twill. I was too drained to point it out. And we are incredibly, unspeakably lucky that she let us leave. Let us? Twill squinted. Yes. Let us. Evie, I croaked. I don't think Saldy's was lying. I know what I saw. Evie. I blinked at her. Hey, Evie, Rain said. Come on. It worked, didn't it? Wizard, Zheng mumbled, but her heart wasn't in it. She sounded groggy and very far away. Why were you along in the first place, HM? Evelyn demanded of me. For exactly that situation. And what did you decide to do? Talk at her in your big girl voice. You should have killed her the moment she started trying to turn us into meat pillars. It was sheer blind luck she was so fascinated by this king in yellow nonsense. Evie, I diffused that she wasn't. I couldn't justify myself. Do you understand what we just met? Evelyn asked. That was a mage who has been outside for so long she isn't remotely human anymore. Looked pretty human to me, Twill said. Especially before she got dressed. In an awful, cold shudder that went from my scalp to the base of my belly, I realized Evelyn was right. Why had I not killed the mage when her hand had split into 1,000 bloody fragments, a sigil to herald some spell to bind us? Because she'd seemed amiable and talkative? Because she offered to help us find books? Because she was pretty and had a nice laugh? Because she was on the stage with me? The show must go on. Could have killed that wizard, shaman, Zheng purred from behind me. Yes, I should have. My eyes dreaded to settle on Evelyn, for fear a yellow-sleeved hand would creep over her shoulder at any moment. Then what did I see? What was the figure in yellow? Evelyn sighed and softened a fraction. I don't know. I don't know what you saw, Heather. On one hand, Saldy's was fascinated enough to change her mind. On the other, Evelyn squeezed her eyes shut and pinched the bridge of her nose. This king in yellow nonsense, I'm half convinced it was her doing in the first place, a bit of flashy illusion, a stage trick to misdirect our attention. Occam's razor and all that, Rain said. Seems a bit of a coincidence otherwise. Evie, I sighed a shuddering sigh. Please don't call it that. Call it what? What are you talking about? Stage trick. Don't use that terminology, please. Not for this. I shuddered inside as I recalled the apparition in yellow, the pale hand descending to take Evelyn away from us, the peek through the crack in the stage curtains. Rain squeezed my shoulders and rubbed the back of my head, but physical contact and skinship could not chase away the weight of broken taboo. Why not? Evelyn snapped. Because I think that's what it wants, I admitted. It. Evelyn pressed her mouth into a thin line. You've bought into everything that monster in a hamster ball said, haven't you? Great. I don't think it was a trick, Evie. I can't shake this feeling I saw something I wasn't supposed to. It wanted to spirit you away, as part of teaching me a lesson or something. I'm serious. What lesson is that? Twill asked. Friends don't let friends get lost in libraries. She laughed without humor, then stopped and frowned. Hey, that's not a bad point actually. You were getting way too into that place, Evie. Evelyn stared at me for a long moment, gritting her teeth. Don't. Heather, just don't. I have enough to worry about with that inhuman mage, without banana-colored ghosts around every corner. Hey, we got away, didn't we? Twill asked. I don't know if you've noticed, Evelyn drawled, rummaging in her pockets and dragging out her notes, slapping them down on the table, followed by the dusty tome she'd picked up, the useless one. But we got away empty-handed, without any of the books we need. Books. Printed pages with little squiggles in them. Perhaps you should try looking at some. Which means we have to go back. Tomorrow, as planned. You think she'll be waiting for us? Rain asked. I pictured Saldy's smug, all-knowing smile, still directed at us in the moment we'd finally slipped away. Probably, Evelyn grunted. And that's my concern, not blanket ghosts. Nothing has followed us. We would know. Between Heather, Lozzie, myself, and the dog-sized invisible spiders, we would know. Her words had the cadence of a practiced recitation, a mantra of security. The house herself would know, Zheng rumbled. The massive demon host levered herself off the floor at last, and stretched like a jungle cat woken from a sun nap. She yawned, and treated us to a vision down a nightmare gullet. This house would know any violation. But it lies calm. The less from you, the better, Evelyn spat at Zheng. Tomorrow, you are staying behind. You've made yourself a liability. Zheng leveled a cold gaze at Evelyn. Twill perked up at that, sensing the silent threat, staring back at the giant zombie. Oh, no, not now, I said, raising my voice. No, don't fight over this now. I go where the shaman goes, Zheng purred. Then Heather can stay behind too, Evelyn said. Pointless bringing her anyway, if she refuses to do the one thing she's meant to. That stung deep, more after the last week and how close Evelyn and I had grown. Yesterday we'd almost shared her bed. I had half a mind to throw a hug at her, but I had too much respect for her aversion to unbidden physical contact. Instead I reached out one limp hand. Tears prickled in the corners of my eyes. Evie, don't, please dash. Evie, you nearly got us killed. The words spilled forth in a hot, vile rush before I could stop them. Did you see yourself out there? The way you looked at the books. You were getting obsessive, falling in love with that place. Oh, don't be absurd dash. We all saw it. That wasn't just Twill being a worrywart. Assume for a moment that I saw nothing, no yellow robes, imagine that it was all so much rubbish. The librarian still surrounded you. That was real. That happened. What did that mean? What were you doing, inside your own head? Wandering in the dark, Preem intoned. The fire went out of Evelyn's eyes. She cast about as if searching inside herself for an answer, but found none. I don't it wasn't, she tried, got nowhere, tried a different path. Perhaps when we return, perhaps I should not, perhaps I need to be kept away from the books. You heard the lady. Rain nodded at Preem. No books for Evelyn, Preem sing-songed. Book-free diet, Lozzie echoed, and crossed her forearms across her chest. Yeah, good call. Good call, Twill said. Evelyn gave a deep sigh, and seemed to come back to herself. She rubbed her eyes. Oh, for pity's sake, it doesn't have to be literal. I'm dash, she shot a look up at Twill, then blushed a hard, ashamed red. I'm sorry, all right? I'm so sick of this. I don't want to do this anymore. If we're to return to the library tomorrow and resume the search, we go prepared to deal with Saldies. Evie, I said gently. You said it yourself. If she wanted to hurt us, we couldn't have stopped her. I don't think she's going to be dangerous to us. I'm with Evie on this, Rain said, loud and clear. Always like some insurance in my back pocket. You could have stopped her, Heather, Evelyn said, measured and careful. And I understand your reasons, but if you can't do it, then I will find a way. There's always things in my mother's notes I can consult. If I'd escalated, I said, she might have done the same. Heather diffused. Lozzie piped up. I want options, Evelyn said. For protection. I contained my little sigh. I was outnumbered, and I had to admit that Evelyn had a good point. The woman in the sphere was an unknown factor, no matter how charming she'd appeared. Every shell has a seam, Jing purred from behind me. Even a shell of iron. Evelyn pointed at Jing, but spoke to me. She stays behind. I'm serious. Wizard dash, Jing rumbled. Jing, don't, I turned on her, using her to displace my frustration and lingering fear. She was big enough and scary enough, she could take it. You dash. I stopped before I even began. There it was again. In the split second before Jing rallied a cynical crooked grin to repel my lecture, I caught a glimmer of the unhappy rust creeping along her razor blade. She hit it well, no flowering display of Byronic sorrow. How could I stay angry at her? Her little bird had rejected her. Shaman, she purred. Jing, we need to talk. Now, before I lose my nerve. We had too many fires to put out. This one had to be quenched now, and I was the only one capable, so I did the only thing that made sense. I wriggled out of Rain's arm and grabbed Zheng's hand so much larger than mine, her reddish-brown skin like softest leather, warm like a fire burned beneath but without the sweat and throb of fever, and moved to drag her out of the workshop. She was a demon and 7 feet tall and could break bricks with her head, but even she deserved privacy for this. Shaman, Zheng laughed, but allowed me to lead her, then shot back over her shoulder. Coming, Yashu. Rain was already moving to follow us. I caught her eye, caught the easy roll of muscles layered over sudden tension. No, I said, shaking my head. No, this isn't about that. I'll keep my mouth and ears shut. Rain put up both her hands. But you need dash. No, Rain, I order you. I pointed with my free hand, at the chair next to Evelyn. Sit. Sit down and help Evie. I need to talk to Zheng. This isn't about that. This is pastoral care. I'm not going to make out with her. You, Twill grimaced. Lozzie clapped a hand to her open mouth in a theatrical parody of a scandalized society lady. Heather Rain protested, still smiling. You want to be my knight, you want to be useful to me? I squeezed the words out and they felt wrong. Was this really what she needed? Then do as I ask. Rain paused, sighed with an even bigger smile. Real, false? I couldn't tell and gave me an ironic little salute. Sure thing, boss. Shout if you need me. Right. Of course. Yes. I had to regather my courage all over again before I could lead Jing out of the workshop. We passed through the kitchen all a jumble with night beyond the windows, and into the front room, where we might win a little privacy for 10 minutes, while the others recovered from the journey back. The front room was as messy as ever. Bare floorboards from 100 years ago, stacked crates with 50 years of family junk, a few shoes in a pile below the spare coats on hooks. Night crouched silently beyond the front door, easing fingers of cold around the seams in the wood. I led Jing to the doorway of the disused sitting room, but she let go of my hand before I could usher her inside. I stepped back, a single pace of minimum safe distance. Shaman. I know what you were doing out there, I spoke up at her, at those razor-sharp eyes watching me with relaxed predatory intent. Suddenly I felt too hot in the coat and hoodie I'd worn for the expedition. I struggled against my coat like a clinging, living thing, shrugged it off and made a low, frustrated noise in my throat, the kind that my mother used to tell me off for vocalizing. Only a decade of being a very good girl stopped me from hurling the coat at the floor in frustration. Jing plucked the coat from my hands and placed it gently on one of the hooks by the front door. "Thank you," I said, lifting the hem of my hoodie to get some air against my skin. Jing raised an eyebrow. "Presenting, shaman." "What?" "Oh. TCH, no." I blushed and sighed. "Don't change the subject. And don't flirt. You have not begun a subject, shaman." Jing grinned. I gave her a tiny glare. Now was not the time to enjoy the way her teasing made me feel. Jing rolled her head, her high shoulders and heavy chest framed by the dark doorway to the disused sitting room. Behind us, I heard the sounds of the others moving in the kitchen, soft voices, Rain speaking down the phone to order takeaway food we all sorely needed. Kimberly emerged from the kitchen doorway and excused herself with a shy head bob as she passed us, making a very overt "please ignore me I'm not listening" face before she took the stairs 2 at a time and vanished into the upstairs corridor. "Can't we dash?" I nodded at the door to the barren sitting room. Jing said nothing, watching me like a bored cat. I sighed and pitched my voice low. "We all know what you were doing out there, in Carcosa. Do you, shaman? Don't act ignorant with me. Jing, you were trying to destroy yourself. You made me a promise, that you would stay with me, that you dash." Jing chuckled softly. "Self-destruction was not my aim. A fight, shaman. A real fight. I crave it like you crave sex." My cheeks flushed, but I kept Jing's gaze. "I want to believe that, but you put yourself in danger." "I put all of you in danger," as the wizard said. Her voice turned ironic, cynical, hurt bubbling below the surface. "I don't care about that." I hissed at her. "Well, okay, no, I do care about that, of course, obviously. But I also happen to care about you, a friend, I swallowed, mouth dry, head throbbing. "More than a friend. Jing, fighting is one thing, but you tried to fight a giant golden tentacle blimp that would have pulled you limb from limb in an instant. Have faith, shaman. And then you tried to make me leave you behind, outside. Don't make me watch you die, Jing. You did not have to watch, shaman." I almost hit her then. It would have been like a mouse bopping an elephant, and just as pointless. I felt my hand rise, but I controlled myself with a hard internal whip crack of willpower. Even my phantom limbs joined in, one useless thought tentacle wrapping around my wrist, though I was already lowering it. To strike her would hurt us both, and fracture what lay between us. "I will never, ever leave you behind," I hissed at her, my eyes filling with angry heat, wet in the corners again. "I can't be your little bird, Jing, I can't, I'm not her. I'm me. And I can't, please don't dash." The tears got worse. "Jing, I do love you, I think, but I can't be what I suspect you need me to be. Please don't throw yourself into self-destruction because of that. Don't do that again." I expected a laugh. Zheng would grumble some darkly indecipherable comment, or growl in the manner of a jungle predator. She would leave and brood and I'd never be sure of her again. Instead, she stared down at me, then reached out and placed one strong hand on top of my head. "You shame me, little bird," she purred, with such tenderness my heart felt fit to break. "Zheng, please," I almost whined, shaking. "I'm not Dash. You are." A warm smile crept across her face, warm because not in spite of the many sharp teeth she showed to me. I made an oath, shaman. And I strayed. You have returned me to the path. That's Dash. I hardly knew what to say. Well, that's good, then. I think. Yes. But Zheng, we Dash. Yellow, in the corner of my eye. A glint of dying light on tarnished bronze, a whiff of mustard gas in stagnant air, the color of headache and thin vomit and infected pus. No scrap of costume left on stage and tugged away by a distracted hand, no tilt of misplaced scenery board, no patch of modern denim caught beneath a period piece costume. A scrap of yellow silk vanished around the doorframe of the disused sitting room, right behind Zheng, with a gentle flutter on the air. Somebody had passed us by. I was meant to see that. No taboo of broken stagecraft. Only art. Zheng responded not to the sight, she was facing the wrong way after all, but to the look on my face. She spun, ready to intercept whatever terrible sight I'd seen behind her, suddenly hard and tense and ready to pull heads off for me. But there were no heads, only the empty doorframe, at which I stared as if a pale hand might curl around it at any second. Zheng stuck her head through and then looked back at me, frowning. "Shaman." I raced forward and peered into the darkened sitting room too. Zheng shielded me with one arm, held me back as if I might hurt myself. Nothing in there, a cleared stage, actors dispersed and props put away, only the old sofa and the remains of some of Evelyn's experiments. I staggered back, starting to hyperventilate. Zheng caught me. "Shaman, what did you see?" Her urgent tone brought rain from the kitchen, almost running across the front room with her truncheon in one hand. I had no extra bandwidth to consider. This meant she'd probably heard most of what Zheng and I had said to each other. "What's going on?" "Hey, Deadite, drop Heath Dash. It is not me, Yashu, lower your metal stick." The shaman saw something. "We were followed home," I whispered as I went weak at the knees. "There's something in here with us. Something yellow." We checked the house from top to bottom. The disused sitting room first, with Twill's nose and my eyes and Evelyn muttering snatches of Latin as she went over the walls with her bone wand in her hand, as if we might find a yellow blanket ghost hidden behind a false panel of wallpaper, like we all lived in a Scooby-Doo cartoon. Then the front room, the kitchen, back into the workshop, detour for the utility room. Every window and doorway in this house had been warded decades ago by Evelyn's mother or grandmother, by mages far more confident and ruthless than us, with our university coursework and messy relationships. Was it always like this? For Evelyn's grandmother, for Alexander Lilburn, for Felicity and her unspeakable demonic parasite? Did all mages fumble in the dark, hoping not to stab themselves through the foot with a rusty nail? God alone knows what the poor takeaway delivery driver thought, when he turned up at the door with curry and naan bread, with us rushing about on emergency footing. Preem answered and paid him and brought the food inside, which either made his day or left him very confused. At least Evelyn took me seriously now. "I shouldn't have made light of your fears, Heather," she told me as she traced and retraced and triple-checked the wards hidden around the old wood of the front door. I was denying my own ones. I am so very tired of being paranoid. "Snot paranoid if they really are out to get you," Twill grunted, then went back to sniffing the air. I said nothing. Eyes peeled. Watched every corner and shadow. Shoulder blades itched. Rain went room to room with her big black combat knife in one hand, stripped down to a t-shirt, on silent bare feet. I crept in her wake down the upstairs corridor. Beyond the habitual circuit of familiar bedrooms and the bathroom and Evelyn's old study/library, it was all too easy to forget how many unused rooms lurked up there, full of say family junk and iron bedsteads and dark windows with Sherrowford light pollution lurking beyond. Jing stayed glued to my shoulder, silent and watchful, the world's most effective bodyguard. Soothing my tattered nerves. Lozzie freed Tenny from her safety zone, and the poor moth girl instantly sensed my discomfort, dispensing many overwhelming hugs with too many limbs. She even forced herself to follow as close to Zheng as she could tolerate. Twill investigated the house in her own way. This place is full o' weird smells at the best of times. No offense. But there's nothing new here. Nothing that smells like Carcosa did, except us. Sorry. Nothing's been broken, nothing's in here, Evelyn repeated, over and over. Nothing is reacting. Maybe it's in your head, Heather. Evie, I hissed, I know what I saw, I thought you believed dash. No, I mean literally. Maybe it's in your head. By the time Evelyn had me standing in the middle of a hastily painted magic circle, midnight had passed with a vengeance. We were all run ragged from 6 hours outside, snatching bites of curry and rice as we'd made sure we hadn't invited a haunting on our own home. Only Lozzie bounced around with too much energy, sitting half in Tenny's lap on the sofa as Evelyn recited bits of Greek at me and frowned harder and harder. There was nothing in my head but me. All this reminded me too much of the Lozzie thing the eye had sent. Another rule breaker, a creature that had brooked no boundary, even Evelyn's wards. Maybe it left already, Twill suggested. Go way, Tenny fluttered, waggling her legs back and forth, slowly undoing Lozzie's braid with her tentacles. Leave. Perhaps it really was stress, I said eventually, hand to my eyes, aching and stinging. I'm sorry, everybody. I'm sorry. I dash. Don't go changing your mind now, Evelyn scolded me gently, and I knew she was really scolding herself. We may have an uninvited guest, though I can't figure out how. We all need sleep, we can't stay awake forever, but anyone sees anything, the slightest thing out of place, scream bloody murder at the top of your lungs. Don't pick it up or follow it around a corner. Do nothing alone. Twill, you're staying in my bedroom again. Alone, yes. Deep down, I knew that flutter of yellow silk had been for my eyes alone. That night was hard because I was terrified. Tucked between Rain's arms, wrapped up warm in bed, with the soft orange of a nightlight spilling across the rugs on the floor, I kept expecting to see a yellow apparition in the corner of my eye, standing in the room with us. I held my breath at every floorboard creak, for fear the door would glide open and in would peer a mask in place of a face, and nobody else would see the figure step into the room as I screamed and sobbed. I lay shuddering with the thought that Rain would wake but see nothing I did. It was all too reminiscent of a decade of ignoring Pneuma-Somatic life, my constant otherworldly harassers that none other could see. But none of that happened. Instead of a ghost, Lozzie wriggled into our bed at about 2 a.m, wormed in next to me on the opposite side from Rain, so I was bracketed between them. With Rain at my back and Lozzie tangled in front, I finally managed to snatch a few hours' sleep before dawn. We all woke up to find Tenny curled up asleep on the foot of the bed, like a giant cat seeking warmth. Aw, she's so sweet. Lozzie dragged herself from the covers and set about petting Tenny's fluffy white fur. Less sweet was how she'd used one long black tentacle to hold the door shut by the handle. That put the wind up me, and prompted Rain to covertly grab her knife to check what might be lurking out in the corridor. Zheng was lurking out in the corridor, sleeping cross-legged against the wall right next to our bedroom door. Rain laughed, I sighed with relief, Lozzie petted Zheng's head, and Tenny commented with an almost perfunctory hiss. Standing guard, left hand? Rain asked. Zheng did not open her eyes. Sitting guard. Don't worry about that, I kept her close, Rain said. And warm enough for both of us. Zheng declined the bait. We wait a day, Evelyn said over breakfast, a late Sunday morning breakfast, a hangover breakfast of leftover vegetable curry and sour stomachs and heavy eye bags. Twill didn't appear until past 11, and when she did, she and Evelyn treated each other with awkward halting silences that set red flags up in my mind. That was not a happy couple who'd snuggled in bed last night. But first things first. Wait a day. I asked. Evie, we need the books. As soon as possible. We wait a day, Evelyn said, surprisingly calm and confident. Because you're under observation, to make sure you're not haunted. I thought you didn't believe in ghosts, I sighed. What I believe is subject to change based on evidence. Ghosts, ugh, Twill did a big shudder. We go back Monday afternoon, Evelyn said, with a tone that brooked no argument, and a dark twinkle in her eye. With questions for soldies. More tests while I stood half-naked in a magic circle in the workshop. More naps. More leaving me alone in the bedroom for a while to see if anything would happen. It never did. No king in yellow, no scraps of jaundiced cloth, no whispers in the dark. No, the show did not go on. The King in Yellow was a profoundly boring book. When Professor Raymond arrived in Lecture Hall B3, I slipped the book back into my bag, and resolved not to think about it again until class was over. The professor, a bull of a man with prematurely white hair and permanently rumpled sleeves, adjusted his owlish glasses and overflowed with apologies for being more than 30 seconds late. Below us, he took to the platform at the base of the lecture hall, dumped his notes on the lectern, and squinted up at the 70 or 80 of us first-year students, arrayed in the seating for yet another lecture in his Introduction to Modernism unit. And Rain. Looks like he eats rocks for breakfast, she leaned over and whispered to me. He's sweet, I hissed back. And you're not even meant to be in here. Shush. Yes, ma'am. Rain winked and settled back into her seat. At least we were relatively alone, up in the third from final row of the lecture hall seating. In truth, I rather liked the professor. Of all the first-year lectures I'd sat through in the 6 months since beginning my degree at Sherrowford University, his were always the most spirited. He loved his subject matter, as did I. Comfortable though a little chill, these spaces were not built for modern heating. Venerable and beautiful, with a private history beyond knowing, it took my mind off everything else in my life. I was safe here, in mundane society, and I intended to make myself feel as mundane as possible. If only for an hour or two, I intended to think about something other than the great library outside, and our inevitable return that afternoon. I had, however, been unable to resist The King in Yellow. The library held 2 copies of the book, a cheap little paperback from the 80s with cover art of a masked man in yellow robes, a silly illustration which looked nothing like what I had seen. I assumed it was meant to be spooky. I'd checked 1 copy out of the library after asking Evelyn's permission. Of course, she'd told me that morning. It's nothing, short stories. Fiction. Utterly bloody meaningless. You're not going to learn anything. But what about the figure in yellow? I'd asked. There must be some kernel of truth in there. She'd frowned, and waved me off, too busy trying to re-rig the gateway in the workshop to return us to where we'd left off Saturday night. Unfortunately for my time and tedium, Evelyn was correct. I'd sat in the lecture hall as it had slowly filled, waiting for class to begin, and discovered The King in Yellow was nothing more occult than a set of rather execrable short horror stories. Though I had no eye for the genre, even I could tell they were not exactly spine-chilling tales of the supernatural. Then again, perhaps my sense of horror was poorly calibrated, for obvious reasons. Rain had read over my shoulder for a bit, but quickly lost interest. This wasn't the first time she'd tagged along for one of my lectures. Our set of safety rules still stood, even if we hadn't seen hide nor hair of Edward Lilburn in weeks. Normally Rain would wait for me in the library or the medieval metaphysics room, whichever was closer, or attend one of her own classes if our schedules lined up, but that day I was not to be left alone for even a minute. In case I was haunted. So Rain was sitting in on a first-year lecture for a subject she didn't study, but they never took attendance at these anyway. A small, immature, girlish part of myself wanted all the people I didn't really know to see me with Rain, and know I was hers, and I got a little flushed inside at that idea. But we settled in to be sensible, me with my notebook and pen, Rain with her curious eyes, one leg crossed over the other, as the professor began talking about Kafka's In the Penal Colony. Professor Raymond was in full flow when reality began to break down. Or when I began to go truly mad. I'm still not sure which. And the nature of being a body, subject to this impersonal machine, he was saying, it's not going to teach anybody anything. Being dehumanized doesn't help. That's the excuse, yes. But it's an abandonment of the personal and the communal, replaced by didactic pain. The wooden platform at the base of the lecture hall was flanked by a pair of small wooden doors. I vaguely knew they led off into the bowels of the building, to office rooms and storage spaces, to the deeper parts where ancient architecture linked up with modern breeze block above our heads. The one to the professor's left suddenly yawned open on silent hinges, I assumed to admit a late-arriving student who had gotten lost in the labyrinth of the university. Nobody else paid it any heed. The professor did not glance that way, too. Absorbed in his own words. In stepped a vision in yellow. My heart stopped. My head throbbed with adrenaline. My guts attempted to crawl up and out of my mouth. I almost lurched from my seat, halted only by a decade of training myself to ignore the unnatural sights of Pneuma-Somatic life. Nobody else reacted. The professor did not break off from his words. No screams or shouts, no fainting in the seats, not a whisper. And one of Kafka's points here is that pain and torture cannot teach, the professor went on. The man in the torture device cannot see the words etched on his own skin. It's a paradox. The apparition, the king in yellow, 7 shades of sunlight, whatever it was, it glided over to stand beside the lectern, then turned toward the audience. Rippling yellow silks and heavy dark cottons lay over no shape of a body beneath, only more layers of yellow upon yellow that parted and rejoined inside a room without wind. The pale hands were tucked up inside the massive drooping sleeves. The yellow hood cradled a pallid mask, facial features so bland and blank there was almost nothing there. Holes for eyes, open on darkness. A suggestion for a mouth. Heather. Rain whispered. You don't see it? I hissed back, eyes wide at the figure in yellow down on the stage. Rain quickly took my hand and squeezed hard. No. Nothing, Rain whispered again. What is it, what do you see? It's back. It's down there, standing right next to the professor. Just standing. I forced myself to take a steady breath. Just like a spirit, I suppose, nobody else can see it. I'm okay, I'll ignore it best I can. But we need to tell Evie, we should . And that's why my assistant here, the professor was saying, is going to demonstrate. He placed a friendly hand on the yellow shoulder. My blood turned to ice. A few volunteers. The professor went on, a little huffy. Come on, this isn't a magic show, this is serious. It'll only take 5 minutes. A few tentative hands went up among my fellow students. Heather. Heather. Rain whispered, urgent now. I stared at her, then back down at the professor and the apparition in yellow. It raised a flawless pale hand and indicated several of the student volunteers, moving with the languid ease of oil through water. They got out of their seats and moved to join it on the platform. You don't Rain, you don't see? I asked, my voice a strangled whisper. You don't see something wrong here? Rain glanced down at the stage, then back at me, frowning with increasing worry. All looks normal to me. Oh, bravo, another voice, an amused voice whispered from the seat behind us. Audience participation. How unique. How novel. I looked over my shoulder. Saldes, the black Norse mage from the depths of Carcosa, was sitting behind us. Resplendent in her red and gold dress, she leaned forward, eyes awed as she gazed down at the show about to begin. She caught me looking and shot me a wink. "Heather?" Rain whispered again, following my gaze for a second before trying to get my attention. "Heather, what's wrong?" I don't know, I dash. "Oh, ignore me, Poppet," Saldes said to me. "I'm not really here." Yellow robes whispered across the wooden boards, and admitted no hint of gate beneath, no kick of feet to free the director from the tripping tangle. A pallid hand invited each volunteer player upon the stage, guided young ladies to their places by raised fingertips, positioned them with feathery touches at elbow, shoulder, and hip. Empty eye sockets in a blank mask gave no taste as to the coming genre, no comedic crinkle of crow's feet, no tragic drawing in of eyebrows, no melodramatic gathering of tears. Soundless but for the rustle of yellow fabric, the king or 7 shades of sunlight, or a demon that had followed us back from Carcosa, or a maniac dressed in rotten rags set the actors in their starting poses. And I appeared to be the only person in the lecture hall who saw anything out of the ordinary. Professor Raymond had retreated to the edge of the stage, to nod and stroke his chin as his ghostly assistant set up the demonstration. The rest of the student audience watched, with all the curious boredom expected of first years in an early class with an eccentric lecturer. Rain's concern was all with me. "Heather, tell me what's wrong," she hissed. "Can't you see it?" I whispered back, mouth bone dry, my hand clammy in hers. "Nothing." "Heather, what's dash?" "Rain, exactly what do you see happening down there? Describe it to me." She only glanced at the stage because I was so terrified. She shook her head. "Nothing out of the ordinary. Mr. Owl Chap is standing aside, looks like the students are gonna do a skit or something. Seems a bit much for a lit class." The yellow director turned an actor's arm here, adjusted another's footing there, rotated a volunteer's wrist by a few precise degrees. The thin sunlight creeping in through narrow slit windows at the top of the lecture hall suddenly clouded over. Several of the ugly modern fluorescent strip bulbs flickered and went out, leaving only the wooden platform lit. Nobody looked up, or remarked on the gathering shadows. How strange it is, not to trust the evidence of one's own senses. I believe if any other had been in my place in the Yellow King's audience that morning, they would have flirted with true madness. But I had 10 years of experience in seeing things other people could not. With a conscious effort, I anchored my mind with that brutal fact, and told myself this was really happening. To do otherwise would play right into those pale hands. One other pair of eyes did see what I was seeing. But I suspected that Saldes was neither a person, nor actually here. "What is happening?" I hissed over my shoulder, at the wizard in red and gold. "I told you already," Saldes answered with breathy excitement and not a little condescension. "The show must go on." "Heather, Heather, look at me," Rain hissed sharply. "Whatever you're seeing, it's not happening. Or it's spirits, Pneuma-Somatic, the same as always." Saldes laughed with a musical tinkle. "Your paramour is not part of the audience, Lady Morel, however close your hearts lie. Best quiet her down before the ushers decide to remove a distraction from the stalls." That got my eyes off the stage and over my shoulder, if only for a second. "Ushers?" I whispered. Saldes shrugged. "Heather," Rain hissed, her other hand gripping my shoulder, squeezing to bring me back. "Heather, look at Dash." "Shoo," I hushed her as loud as I dared. "Rain, please stop. Don't disrupt the play. I think you might be in danger if you do." In a testament to her trust for me and how quickly she could adapt to the unexpected, Rain did exactly as I asked. She didn't understand, she couldn't see, she just dealt with it. She glanced at the stage again, then over her shoulder at the closed doors to the lecture hall. She scanned the other students, the empty seats, the exits. One hand crept inside her leather jacket. "Right you are," she whispered, wire tight and ready to spring. "Do we need to get out of here?" I don't know," I admitted. Down on the stage, the yellow conductor was making increasingly granular adjustments to the players, bending a finger here, tilting a head there. I noticed with relief that the student volunteers were still acting like students roped into a silly practical demonstration. Trying not to laugh, blushing faintly, sharing amused looks with their friends in the audience. 8 of them. 6 women, 2 men. There's people involved now, I hissed. And it's touching them, it can't be Pneuma-Somatic, can't be. Maybe we should get out, yes, maybe it'll follow me, leave them alone and dash. The retreat died on my lips. The yellow apparition finished the preliminaries, and gifted each actor with a role. A porcelain hand brushed each volunteer's face, caressed a cheek, traced a jawline, shivered across a chin. At that touch, each volunteer became somebody else. There was no actual physical transformation, no terrible explosion of change, no warping of flesh like melting plastic, no ruined puppet flopping upon the stage. In a way, that would have made this easier. At least then I could have shot out of my seat with a scream, or scrabbled together some brain math to reverse what this stray godling had wrought upon innocent bystanders. But no, the yellow intruder's magic was one we humans knew all too well. Facial muscles shifted in a million tiny ways, settling into expressions alien to their wearers. Musculature slackened here and tightened there, pose flowed like water, shoulders rolled back and up, or slouched with old pain. Eyes relaxed and fluttered, or narrowed into hard squints. Grins cracked open on faces that had never grinned like that before. Arms clutched at themselves in mirror mockery. Teeth flashed that were neither sharp nor too many. One of the volunteers ran a hand through her hair and winked. Another chirped a giggle. One need not be a mage to recognize acting. Except none of these people were actors. I do not know much about the art, but I do understand it's not just reading the script in the right kind of voice. It's in how you hold yourself, in how you breathe, in tone and glance, and how straight your back stands, in every micro-expression and habit and subconscious tell. Acting is to rid oneself of everything that makes you seem like you, and replace them with other parts. Every single volunteer suddenly displayed the mastery of a classically trained, lifelong veteran of the stage, and they did so without uttering a single word. Oh, I swallowed. Well, that's just obscene. Rain eyed me carefully. It's beautiful, Saldi said. They have you down perfect. Don't be such a Philistine, little Englisher. The actors' roles were us. They looked nothing like us, of course. The young woman unknowingly aping Rain's shoulders back beaming confidence was nowhere near as athletic as the real Rain. She was soft and cuddly around the middle, with mousy hair down to her shoulder blades and an angular face that should not have been able to pull Rain's grin at all, but did. Evelyn was played by a man, which vaguely offended me at first, before I saw the miracle of observational mimicry. He had her hunched shoulders, her awkward spinal twist, the kink of her hips and the uneven set of her artificial leg. He even had her scowl. Twill, bestial and worried, played by a woman who should have been too willowy and slight, too gentle-looking. Preen was also played by a man, but that made no difference in the face of this supernaturally bestowed skill, straight-backed and precise, lack of expression and expression all its own, there was no mistaking who he was meant to be. Zheng was absurd, played by a woman shorter even than I, but languid predatory intent lingered in every tilt of her head and kink of her amused lips. Even Lozzie was correct, giggly and flouncy in the body of a woman who probably spent her free time playing rugby, whose muscle mass could have given the real Zheng a run for her money. As they changed, the lecture hall took on an air of hyperreality. Every color seemed more saturated, every line of scenery and clothing sharper, every scent richer. I could see every ripple in the yellow godling's robe, every eyelash on the actor's lids, every rise and fall of every chest, every flash of imitation face. And then there was me. TCH, I tutade at Saldi's. No, they don't have me perfectly, don't be absurd. She has your slouch. She's 10 times prettier than me. And about 3 cup sizes bigger in the chest. I huffed, trying to triage outrage and fear with my own performance. Playing a character is one thing, but down on that stage were the mannerisms and expressions of real people in my life, people I valued and loved, people I chose to spend my life with. Seeing them stolen and recycled made me angry in a way I couldn't explain. I risked a sideways glance at the real Rain, and saw the same mannerisms right there, right next to me. "Heather," Rain whispered, gentle but serious, "can I ask who you're talking to?" "Somebody who's not really here. I think. Saldy's. She's behind us, but you can't see her." The pale hand brushed across the brow of the final of the 8 volunteer players, a gently pudgy woman with a heart-shaped face and lots of ginger curls. I expected Tenny, or perhaps Kimberly, to sprout into being in pose and gesture, and briefly wondered if the former was even possible. But it wasn't either of them. At first I didn't comprehend who she became, who the role was meant to be. I did not recognize the bouncy childlike shoulder wiggle, the happy side-to-side bob of the hips, the grope of a small hand for an absent partner. Neither did I recognize the awkward twitching layered on top, or the starving look behind the eyes. I did not recognize any of it, but my subconscious did. It was partly me. Me at 8 years old, before Wonderland, and then molded by a different set of influences. Tears prickled in my eyes. Fear turned to cold anger. "You cannot show me this," I whispered down at the yellow thing. "You monster, you cannot show me this." "Oh, but this is the entire point," Saldy supplied. "Only the fact she didn't exist stopped me from turning on the spot and slapping her stupid. Isn't this the aim of your quest, Lady Morell? You can hardly be expected to deduce the true intent of the author without the goal on stage. The show would make no sense." "It's grotesque," I whispered, my throat thick with emotion. I wanted to leap out of my seat and run onto the stage. Part of me didn't care if it was an imitation, if it looked nothing like the real person, if it was plucked from my own memories or a connection with the abyss or some unthinkable simulacrum. It's violation. All art is violation, Saldes said with dismissal. "When we return to Carcosa, I shall slap you for that," I hissed. "Blame the pretender, not I," Saldes drawled. "I'm right here in the audience with you, Lady Morell, and I mean no offense." "Heather? Heather," Rain repeated. "We getting out of here or not?" I shook my head. I could no more leave the performance than I could stop breathing. The king in yellow, or 7 shades of sunlight, or a ridiculous ghost in yellow sheets, had summoned my twin to the stage. Played by a woman that looked nothing like Maisie or I, but there was more of her down there than I'd seen with my physical eyes in 10 years. "No," I hissed, and scrubbed my eyes with my sleeve. "No, we can't leave. I can't leave, I have to. I want to watch. I need to know." I've never known a pretender to be so literal. Saldes allowed herself a mildly disappointed hum. "Or perhaps a demonstration of power. I suppose you're foreign royalty, after all. Only the most conventional form is acceptable. Unless this is merely a narrative within a narrative." Her voice brightened at that, and laughed another tinkling laugh. "But hush, I will still myself. It's beginning." The Yellow Master stepped back, falling into muted shadow as if out of focus, and the players began to move. I'd only ever seen one real play before, a production of Macbeth, alongside the rest of my secondary school literature class. I did possess vague childhood memories of our parents treating Maisie and I to several Christmas pantomimes, though those hardly count. But I know the theory. A play is fragile illusion, forged by agreement between actors and audience. Flesh and blood in real time, pretending to be something it is not. Even the worst play captures a glint of that magic, invokes the stage as a place of transformation, invites the audience to believe. It should not have worked, not on me, not here, not like this. The actors looked nothing like us. I was terrified out of my mind, still not sure if I was going mad, and distracted by trying to see beneath the yellow robes at the back of the stage. According to the clock on the wall, the scene the actors played out took no more than Professor Raymond's promised 5 minutes, and they acted entirely without dialogue, a story of silent gestures and meaningful looks and pure physicality. It was so powerful it reduced me to tears. I cannot do it justice. I am incapable, words fall short. It is often said that one cannot simply read Shakespeare's plays, one must see them performed, and that the same is true of any great playwright. The Yellow Pretender was one such genius, and the intended audience was me alone. The play was a vision or, I prayed, as I came to understand, a version of what would happen when we tried to rescue Maisie from Wonderland. Not literal, of course. The Maisie actor always out of reach at the edge of our group was not literally in the eye's clutches, Wonderland itself did not blossom around the actors' bodies. If it had, I would have been provoked to intervention, or destruction, or worse. But it was in the actors' forced, mimicked expressions, in their fear and resolve, in the pain and anger on my face. Wonderland was present via interpretation, in panicked gesture and mad scramble across the stage, in a circle of fellowship that exploded under its own weight. It was a story of how I was going to fail. Under the pressure of the eye's attention, Evelyn's efforts collapsed, and she with them, mewling and broken. Preem wanted to help, but she was lost inside herself, redirected to her own lack. Twill became an animal. Zheng and Rain turned on each other. The actors played out a stylized fight, all strike and block and twist with bare hands. Lozzie stayed by my side too long, refused to leave when I told her to go, returned when I pushed her away. The real me was so absorbed in the personal horror of the story, that I almost didn't realize when the actor playing me started bleeding. Great slow rivers of blood flowed from her nose, her eyes, out of her ears, stained the front of her t-shirt and jumper as she stared upward me, defying the eye, and that was no fake blood. She bled far more than I ever did when executing brain math. A wave of crimson choked out of her mouth. Oh no, I whispered, finally ripping my attention away from what was happening on stage in favor of what was really happening on stage. Heather, the real Rain, squeezed my hand harder. Oh no, that girl's going to die, she's just normal, she can't bleed like that, not without Dash. The action reached a crescendo, and exploded into climax. Heather collapsed in a blood-soaked heap, just as she seemed to break through some unseen barrier, her last effort to reach for the Maisie actor thwarted by her own failing body. The Twill actor leapt at Preem over Evelyn's prone, still, unbreathing corpse, and awful tearing, ripping sounds came from their frantic struggle. At exactly the same moment, Rain and Zheng's duel ended. The Rain actor produced a knife, a real one, huge and sharp, and slit Zheng's throat in a bloody arc of short-lived triumph, disemboweled a moment later by Zheng's death spasm, guts spilling across the stage like writhing snakes. Not one of them screamed. Not even a grunt. The yellow nightmare whispered forward, into the wreckage, and engulfed the Maisie actor in yellow robes. She was gone. Real blood, real guts, real death. This was no illusion. The mingled reek of blood, sweat, and shit filled the air. Only a decade of self-control kept a scream from clawing up my throat. Oh, bravo! Bravo! Salties slapped her hands together in wild applause. Not exactly subtle, but I approve. Real Grand Guignol treatment, yes. Beautiful. I reached both hands into the black pit of my soul, and summoned the eye's lessons. Innocent people lay dead, because an alien god thing wanted to teach me a cruel lesson, but I could reknit them if I was fast and precise. It would cost me. I could perform miracles, but I would have to run the equations beyond my body, return to the abyss. And that awful, ugly, bloody prediction upon the stage was so convincing that I wanted to leave, go back to the ocean between worlds, be what I was meant to be. What was the point in staying here, if my actions, my plan, would lead to that? Better I become a thing of photons and starlight and black ocean depths, than lead all my friends, my beloved, to that. A trade. My useless, disgusting ape self for those innocent dead who weren't even part of this. But then the yellow beast reached for one of the fallen players, the Jing actor, I think, and passed that pale hand over her torn throat. The wound was gone. Blood vanished behind the ripple of yellow sleeves. The actor got to her feet with a flushed face and sheepish smile, no longer channeling the mannerisms and gestures of my beautiful demon host. She took a nervous bow and shuffled off the stage. 7 shades of serious shenanigans went from actor to actor, raising the dead and spiriting away the mess. A stage trick. Relief flooded me even as I sniffed back a bloody nose of my own, the product of stalled brain math. The vanished Maisie actor reappeared from behind the yellow robes, and followed the others back to her seat. Heather, yo, brain math, now. Rain hissed. I just shook my head. Why show me this? My breath shuddered as I whispered down at the yellow thing. What was the point? Just to tell me I'm going to fail? I'm going to kill all my friends. Heather, you're not going to kill all your friends, Rain murmured, sudden and hard and certain. I don't know what you're seeing, but you're not going to do that. Professor Raymond cleared his throat and returned to the lectern, adjusting his glasses with an awkward smile. Well, there you have it, he said. I hope that made sense. And thank you, he nodded at the yellow mockery. The king in yellow turned and glided back toward the little wooden side door. What was the point? I hissed again, brimming with anger now. I glanced over my shoulder, but Saldy's was gone, her seat empty once more. When I looked back at the stage, the yellow torturer was still there, on the very edge, about to exit. It stopped and looked directly at me with those dark holes for eyes. I held the gaze. It bowed low in thanks or mockery or apology and left the lecture hall. The door closed behind it. The light bulbs flickered back on. The clouds passed from the sun. Right then, where were we? Ah yes, the torture machine. Professor Raymond picked up exactly where he'd left off. Okay, right, okay, I whispered to Rain, shaking harder than I'd thought, soaked in my own layer of cold sweat as I wiped at my bloody nose with the back of my hand. I would very much like to get out of here now, yes please. Help me. All I saw was a bunch of students doing a silly skit. But if that's what you say happened, it happened, and I believe you. Rain kept her voice low, in case of random passers-by as we climbed the stairs in Willow House, as quickly as my shuddering heart would allow. Thank you, yes, but Rain, we need to get home. We need to, I hissed back. We need Evie to look at my head, and I can't do this. I can't let you all end up like that, I dash. Medieval metaphysics room is closer. Rain gave me a confident grin. It's also warded. We'll get you there, lock the door, then call Evie. She'll know what to do. Will she? I murmured. Rain squeezed my hand tighter, and dragged me onward. We reached the door to the medieval metaphysics room, tucked away in the bare concrete stairwell at the rear of the building. Thin gray sunlight filtered through the single tiny window. Rain had her key ready before we even stopped. She got the door open and got me inside with a minimum of fuss, then left me shaking and shivering alone for a moment as she closed and locked the door behind us. Sit down, take a moment. It's gonna be all right, she told me. We hadn't spent any great amount of time in here lately, but the medieval metaphysics room was still a rallying point for us, a main stop on our routine of safety when beyond the walls of number 12, Barnslow Drive. A comfortable room with a kettle and some tea and some nice armchairs, where I regularly waited for Rain to pick me up, or where Evelyn came between her own classes. We'd even had Preem in here a few times, bustling about and making tea. The familiar sagging bookshelves and the soft light through blanket-covered windows eased my terror, gave me a moment to take a deep breath and exhale slowly. Even the old racking that filled half the room felt friendly. Perhaps the thing in yellow had been forced to use the lecture hall because the house was warded, so perhaps we were safe in here, for now. On shaking legs I walked over to one of the shaded lamps and fumbled for the switch, felt better for the light, then walked back to Rain. She had her mobile phone out, thumbing at her contact list. "Seriously, you can sit down, I'm right here, not going anywhere without you." Rain raised the phone to her ear with a wink for me. "Emergency first, I'll contact Evie, then I promise I'll help you get cleaned up." "Yes, yes of course." I sniffed back the lingering nosebleed, dabbing at my face with a tissue, then let my shoulders slump. "I'll sit." Our backs had been turned to the trio of armchairs and the wide table in the middle of the room, for about 5 seconds. When I turned back I screamed and jumped out of my skin. Rain, bless her, keep her safe, I love her so much, reacted faster than I thought possible. She dropped the phone and drew her big black combat knife from inside her jacket in one fluid motion. With a maneuver that felt too gentle for how fast she moved, she took my shoulder and shoved me back, interposing herself between me and the occupant of the chair, who had not been there a moment ago. Her senses didn't even register what it was until I was safe, until she was protecting me. I should have been the one shielding her. It was Rain. The figure slumped in the chair was Rain, or at least, a patchwork parody of Rain. A life-size wooden doll with a painted face and fake hair and cheap, scratchy versions of her clothes, which looked to have been sewn together from various different cast-off pieces of spare fabric. The doll itself was all mismatched too, arms and legs of different sizes, with different kinds of joints, made from different colors of wood. But that face! A masterwork of cruel satire. Her rakish grin, the flash of her eyes, the angle of her nose. It was all there, made ugly and false. A rusted butter knife lay in the doll's lap. In one hand it held a length of industrial twine. In the other, a large sewing needle. 2 thick bands of similar twine, one rose red in color, the other dark crimson, were wrapped about it, under the clothes and over the clothes and looping the torso and hooked around the limbs. The wire braced it, held it together, kept the doll in one piece. At least it wasn't moving. Rain. You see this, right? You see. Rain could see it, and she didn't need to tell me so. The point of her knife wavered. She began to form a word, a question, but trailed off into silence, frowning in a way I'd never seen her frown before, as if over a bittersweet pain in her heart. She smiled through the frown. "Ow," she sighed. "Ow." I echoed, panic in my throat. "Rain, are you okay? Are you, it's not hurt you, you dash." "I'm okay," she said, steady and careful, keeping her knife up, and I had rarely heard her less okay. This, Heather, could you not look at this thing, please? Maybe I can deal with dash." I lost my temper. "Stop it," I snapped over Rain, over her shoulder, at the dull mockery of her most well-kept secrets, ones I didn't even know. The doll did not move. "Stop this right now," I went on at it, voice shaking as my anger grew. "Tormenting me is one thing. You can get away with that, because deep down sometimes I think I deserve it. But you do not get to torment Rain. You stop it, this instant." "Nothing, except Rain's breathing. I once ripped a human being from the eye's clutches," I said to the doll. "You're not as complex as that. If I think hard enough, I can unravel you, no matter what you pretend to be, no matter where you hide. Go away, and leave us alone, or shall we find out what's under those yellow robes?" The Rain doll exploded like a dust devil of yellow sand, a tiny whirlwind of jaundice and bile and dying sunlight. With a swirl of fabric and a whirlpool wave of yellow ripple, it resolved into the figure behind the illusion. We had been admitted backstage. The apparition in yellow stood before us. Up close, it was an awful thing. Not the pallid hands which emerged from the dangling sleeves like ropes of dead intestine, not the blank mask of perfect ivory, nor the holes for eyes, nor the bottomless emptiness behind them. I realized, in the way one creature recognizes another akin to itself, that the yellow robes themselves were all that mattered. Yellow was the medium, the canvas, and the truth. Cotton and silk and wool, and fabrics named in no human language. A billion ripples, like an ocean seen from miles up. Patterns formed in sleeve and hood and skirts, slow spirals and mountain ridges, hypnotic and infinite. Rain almost went for it with her knife. Bless her, but she can be very stupid sometimes. I stopped her by stepping past her knife, into her path toward the yellow thing. Pure instinct drove me, not courage or defiance. Rain wasn't merely not on the same level as the yellow director, she wasn't even the same manner of being. She may as well try to stab the North Sea. But me? I was close enough. Abyssal instinct pushed me forward because my mate was in danger. Before I knew what I was doing, I'd shoved past Rain's shoulder, I'd spread phantom limbs to make myself look big, and I opened my mouth and hissed. Long and loud, sharp and sure. An inhuman sound. The Yellow King did not move. It took me a long moment to come back. The wet meat in my throat felt all wrong, shouldn't have been meat at all. The hiss left behind an echo of euphoric rightness. For a moment of adrenaline and instinct, I'd expressed the truth that lay under my skin. Vibrating with aggression, crashing back into the sagging reality of my own body, I almost sobbed. Heather Dash, Rain whispered from behind me. This is Dash, my voice was so ugly compared to the hiss, I almost choked on it. But I didn't take my eyes off the yellow robes. This isn't something you stab or shoot, Rain. Dunno about that, Rain said. Always gotta give violence a chance. I told the yellow provocation. The play is over. You made your point, fine. But I've had enough of grim lessons from cruel gods. You must see what I really am. I'm not bluffing. If you choose to keep tormenting us, I will peel you open. The king in yellow bowed its head, to hide the eyeless pale mask inside the yellow hood. Then it raised those porcelain hands, and peeled the hood away. Beneath, it possessed a head, and a face, and one last torment to inflict upon me. For just a moment I thought it was Maisie. 7 shades of sunlight, 7 shades of sunlight corrected me. In my voice, with my mouth, set in my face. The head above the rippling neckline of yellow robes was an exact replica of mine, perfect as a mirror. The bowing motion from before the reveal had even served to reduce the thing's height to match mine. Why, I managed, almost crying with cruel hope. Why? Went Rain. Plenty of people have lost their temper with me over the centuries, 7 shades grimaced, in the exact self-conscious way I might do when having made a nasty faux pas. It comes with the territory, and I am sorry. But nobody has ever credibly threatened to disrobe me by force, that's new. So I thought I better show my face. My face, I hissed. Maisie's face. How dare you? Ah. Oh, 7 shades winced hard, flustered and awkward. The effect made my head swim with recognition, as she spoke with my own voice, my mannerisms, my micro-expressions. Oh dear. Yes. Oh, I'm so sorry for the confusion. You're such a unique case. Or, not unique. That's the point, yes, the exact problem. You're not unique, there is another in the wide seas of all reality with the same face as you. I do apologize. I'm sorry. That was not my intent. Did I really look like that? There was something deeply uncanny about seeing oneself in motion, like a video recording but 100 times worse. A mousy, scrawny, skittish young woman with thin brown hair, an unhealthy pallor to her skin, and deep-set rings of old exhaustion around her eyes. And the eyes themselves, blinking, twitchy, perhaps warm but terminally afraid. Yes, I had to concede, 7 shades had me down perfectly. Again, I'm so sorry, she was saying. Did I really speak like that, as well? So precise, so polite, but with a tremor of nervous tension. My chest ached with sympathy for myself. I chose your face because it's always easier to talk to a person as their self, especially if they're really introspective. Which, you are. She tried to pull a gentle smile, but it came out very awkward. Like me. Stop it, I said, more offended than afraid. Stop imitating me, stop, take it off. I'm not imitating you, Seven Shades said, voice a little unsteady with nerves. My nerves. That would be most disrespectful, both to you, and to the art. While I inhabit your form, I am bound by the limits of your personality. I'm not going to suddenly go all spooky and well. You can imagine, I'm sure. A humorless laugh escaped my lips. You've chosen the wrong person to imitate, I said. I barely trust myself to do the right thing 5% of the time. I'm sorry. She winced again, tilting her head. I could choose one of your loved ones instead, but that would be contrary to my aim here. Sorry. Seven Shades' imitation did not extend below the neckline of rippling yellow robes. The hands were still long and bony and porcelain perfect, not mine. The robes themselves continued their ocean-like infinite dance, their half-glimpsed swirling patterns, their admission of nothing beneath. I reminded myself, that was the being I was really speaking to. Do I really apologize this much? I glanced at Rain, just over my shoulder. Rain was having a harder time with this. Her eyes went back and forth between my face and Seven Shades' imitation of my face, her eyebrows jammed halfway up her forehead like she'd suffered a critical software malfunction, her knife limp in her hand. Sometimes, she said eventually. Rain, this is incredibly weird for me, I said. Help. It's weirder for me, Rain said, then forced a grin. Don't think I could handle two of you, Heather. I've only got one tongue. Rain. I hissed. This is hardly the time. Seven Shades cleared her throat too, fighting down an insistent blush and scowling indignation at Rain. My scowl, my blush. Yeah, see? You like that experiment? Rain nodded at the yellow daughter. That's you, Heather. I can't even tell the difference, it's so good. This is some extra spooky shit, and I do not like it. My intention was not to disquiet you either, Seven Shades said. Oh yeah? Rain gave her a quietly eloquent look. I had never before seen her able to deliver such disapproval and doubt with a smile on her face. Pain lingered back there too, behind Rain's eyes. Seven Shades of Sunlight winced, embarrassed and shamed. The only reason I'm not sticking a knife in you right now is because Heather asked me not to, Rain went on. But you keep saying things in her voice, with her face, I'm gonna step up and peel it off you. Pissrag robes won't stop me. Oh, don't be absurd, I'm not going to hurt you, Rain, Seven Shades told her with my voice, faintly outraged. Heather can hardly resolve her ménage à trois if I remove you from her tail. Then it would just be her and Zheng, and that's hardly why I followed you. That would be sweet, but boring. Excuse me. I bristled. You what? Ménage à trois. Household for three, she said with another awkward smile. Or in your case, perhaps for 8. 9. I've lost count, sorry. Why does everyone want me to have a bloody threesome? I snapped. This is absurd. An alien god wants me to have a threesome? For pity's sake, you're lucky you got me, Seven Shades sighed, exactly like me. Some of my siblings and cousins delight in asking dark questions that lead to awful places. Your quest offers plenty of opportunity for tragedy, or cruel farce, or simple, scorn, she winced at that word. If I hadn't taken an interest, somebody darker would have. Somebody far less interested in the delicate tangle of women loving women. Count your blessings you didn't meet the sepia prince, or the jaundiced child. They'd have you devouring your own intestines by now. I shook my head at her in disbelief. You're not a person, you're just wearing my face. Why should you care about relationships, or love, or anything human. She blinked at me, hurt. My father's family is very large. One of us has to be a lesbian. Typical, Rain muttered. Muff magnet, the pair of us. Then why show me that awful, awful performance? I asked, my anger returning. Cold now. What did that have to do with anything? You made your point, I'm going to fail. 7 shades of sunlight scrunched my face into an expression of solid determination, serious and small. I'd never seen that expression in a mirror before. The times I pulled that face, I didn't exactly have a mirror handy. And for a moment, just for a moment, I knew why my friends believed in me and followed me. We both know you have no hope of defeating the eye, she told me. If those words had come from any other mouth, in any other tone, would have spat them back in the speaker's face. But there was my own worst fear, in my own words. You cannot even hope to hold the jaws asunder for a moment or two, she continued, sad and shaking. No, I said. No, it's dash. Not in your current state. That's your plan, isn't it? The one you don't tell anybody else about. You're banking on a millisecond's reprieve, during which you will find your sister, and pull her free. And you know it's folly. Evie's no. Evelyn's working on the invisus oculus. It worked in reverse on Tenny, that's why we need the books, we're going to dash. To make you all invisible to its attention, on the ground of Wonderland itself. For how long? And then what? As soon as you reach out to find your sister, it will know you. You're setting yourself up for a contest of strength. Or strength of will, at least. I gathered my friends. I almost shouted at her. Rain took my shoulder, gently, but I shook her off. That's what Maisie told me to do. And yet you're going to wrestle the eye into the dirt with force of will. What role do your friends have to play in this? I don't. Suddenly the awful, bloody, cruel play clicked into place. The Heather actor, alone in the center and reaching for Maisie, while all about her my friends fell alone and apart, while my attention was focused on the eye. Your brain math alone could not peel back my layers, 7 Shades said. You'd give me a rough old time of it, certainly. But you couldn't win. And I am descended from something very much like the eye, but also a little like you, a being that dragged itself out of the abyssal ocean, once upon a time. You have performed the same miracle, recently, and returned to a body of flesh. But you refuse to use what you brought back. How? I've been trying. I felt tears on my face now. All I can do is make tentacles that pull me apart from the inside dash. Brute force is not the only way to use enlightenment dash. And it hurts. I shouted at her, at me, at myself. All the time. It hurts, being in this body, being wrong, and I can never have it again, and then why? Why tell me to do something I can't? You have tied yourself upside down from the tree, put out an eye, and returned with the keys of self-creation, yet you refuse to use them, 7 Shades said, in my voice, almost sobbing and sniffing, reflecting my own pain back at me. Refuse? Refuse? I echoed. I'm learning, I'm still learning, from the clay thing my sister sent, from Dash. You could wander the library of Carcosa for 1,000 years, sit at my father's feet for 1,000 more, and your methods would still avail you nothing against the eye, and you know it. I stopped shouting at her. She was right. I was right. Brute force is not the only way to use enlightenment, she repeated, sniffing, wiping the echo of my tears from her imitation eyes. My father and my siblings and I, we have one way. You need to find your own. I hated myself for being such a sniveling coward. Left my sister behind. Cut off from the abyss, trapped like this. Won't give Rain or Zheng what either of them want of me. Hey, Rain said softly. This is some cryptic bullshit. Tell her what you mean. I am only a question, 7 Shades told her. I'm sorry. Try, Rain told her. 7 shades huffed through her distress. In the abyss, Heather was a thing of speed and grace. Grace, friendship, solidarity. These are potential building blocks. Things the eye can never draw on. What difference does that make? I said, throat thick with defeat. You're right. It's too much. How can I ever do anything against it? Power is relative to form of expression, 7 shades told me. Heather, you've come to an uncomfortable accommodation with what you brought back. You still think of it as a side of yourself, instead of accepting it as just you. I shook my head. Rain's right, these are nonsense riddles. How would that even help? How would that help save my sister? 7 shades of sunlight just stared at me, with my own sad twist of my own little mouth. If you care so much, why don't you help me? I asked. You're an outsider, a real one. If you want my play to end well, why not help me? She shook her head my head, with a sigh. You haven't listened to a word I've said, Heather. That's not what I am. It's not what you are either, but you're trying to bend yourself that way, playing the eye at its own game. My way is no more suited, and if you won't even listen to yourself telling you these things, then I shall resume the play until you bloody well learn. She tooted, like me losing my temper. It was a mistake to talk to you like this, so soon after mere preamble. I am sorry. The robes flowed upward as the pallid hands rose to flip the yellow hood back up. On impulse, I reached out to halt her. Human fingertips recoiled from the edge of the yellow robes, but a phantom limb passed right through. Wait. I demanded. Why don't you just tell me what you mean? Because I do not know the answer, 7 shades said, and her voice was no longer fully my voice, but soft as the crackle of burning paper. The imitation face had taken on a jaundiced, fleshy sepia color. I can only pose questions. It is my nature. You should really settle in, for the rest of the play. 7 shades of sunlight, the imitation in yellow, drew her hood over her head and stopped being me. Another stage trick. The hood hid her imitation of my face behind soft yellow ripples like wind across water, then she straightened up as if she had been bowing, and my face inside the hood was gone, replaced by the pale mask with empty eye holes. A bottomless depth stared back at Rain and I. A hole in the world, fringed in yellow. I expected her to vanish, to wink out of reality or spin into nothingness with a glint of sunlight on brass and a hint of chlorine gas. She'd made her intention clear, however mangled by the need to express it through my borrowed mouth. The play would resume until I learnt the appropriate lesson. The only force capable of compelling her otherwise lay inside my own head, in hyperdimensional mathematics and heartsick pain, and I suffered too much of the latter right then to rally the former. But 7 shades stood there, silent and rippling and beyond human communication. Like a friend who goes to the doorway to leave, then lingers to talk further. Nasty little prima donna. 7 shades had also given up imitating my height, and my head swam with an impossible paradox. I regarded the mask with my neck unbent, but the yellow robes seemed so tall that surely they brushed the ceiling. Without the softening appendage of a copied human head, the yellow thing was all thing, a grease stain smeared upon the surface of reality, rotten fabric slithering across dead flesh, bile running from between slack lips. I was staring into the vastness of a yellow gas giant, from orbit, turning slowly in the void. What you waiting for, you lanky streak? Oh, piss, said Rain. At the edge of my perception, I felt her tense up, saw the matte black flicker of her knife. Without my face in the way, Rain was ready to give violence a chance. I made an incoherent noise at her over my shoulder that may have been a hiss and may have contained her name, and which definitely meant, I have already told you not to stab this thing, do not make me say so again. She said she won't hurt me, Rain purred, voice low and focused. Why not give it a go? And I knew from experience that she was a hair-trigger touch away from going at 7 shades with her knife. Because I don't know why she hasn't left, I hissed back. And how are you not freaking out at this? In the corner of my eye, Rain shrugged. I almost couldn't deal with Seven Shades, not like this, not without my face, not when she'd robbed me of the clarity in anger. Weird Pneuma-Somatic life was one thing, bizarre animal amalgamations and slime-dripping proboscises and bee-tentacled woodland giants striding across the landscape. They were old hat, especially since Tenny. Almost old friends. But Seven Shades was a level of unnatural that made my ape brain cringe away as if from a visible sickness. The abyssal thing in me did not care, it saw an equal. I gripped that as hard as I could. Well, I demanded of Seven Shades, trying to rouse my temper again through all the dysphoric misery. I thought you were going to resume the play. Going to conjure up another way of mocking my need for the abyss. You're not human, you never were human, you're not even pretending to be human, how can you understand that pain? You dash, I almost choked up. You get to be whatever and whoever you want. Get out. Leave me alone. Slowly, with all the solemnity of an executioner with axe in hand, Seven Shades turned her head, her mask, her hood, to look at Rain. And with a quick gesture from those pallid hands, she performed her miracle a second time. Seven Shades dipped her head, lowered her hood, and shot us both a beaming grin. Rain's grin. My heart fluttered in my chest, same as when the real Rain grinned at me like that. Confident and toothy, bright and irresistible, her total attention and a promise of more. The smile which pressed me up against a wall and made me forget the world existed beyond my own body, the smile which told me everything was going to be okay because Rain would take care of it, that I deserved affection and care and love, the smile which had peeled me out of a dirty toilet cubicle last year and bid me to live again. Stolen. With Rain's warm brown eyes and Rain's short chestnut hair and Rain's fine cheekbones. The real Rain had gone very still. I thought you said dash, I struggled. No loved ones. Ah, well, about that, yeah. Seven Shades shot me a wink, Rain's wink. But this ain't for you, Heather. I'm thinking about a parallel production, if you know what I mean. You're not the only one who needs to be down for a three-way. Somebody else needs a play too. Next to me, Rain adjusted her footing, every muscle coiling like a spring. Rain, I hissed at her. Don't dash. But for you, Rain. Seven Shades told her, with that familiar confident grin. Just existing. Ho, that's already a play and a half every day, ain't dash. Rain lunged, knife out for the kill. A couple of months previously, Rain had attempted to explain to me the basics of knife fighting, with the assistance of some YouTube videos presented by men who seemed like the greatest physical threats they'd ever face were heart disease and hypertension, not blades in the dark. I didn't retain much except for her enthusiasm and the rather enjoyable sight of her stripped down to tank top and shorts to demonstrate footwork, which gave me lots of excuses to stare at her toned abs. All the stuff about 45-degree angles and repeated drills and proper grips went over my head. I did care, but only because she cared, and because it was something she was good at and enjoyed. But a few of the most basic of basics had lodged in my memory, if only because they ran so counter to what one saw in television and movies, how 99% of real knife fights end up on the floor within seconds, that avoiding or retreating was always superior to actual combat, how you should keep your body behind your knife, and the core importance of self-control. Rain went for Seven Shades because she lost her temper, and the basics went out the window. 2 steps to close the distance, fast enough to make me flinch and stumble back. Knife twisting, arm positioning for a gut stab. I watched in open-mouthed horror as the blow landed, as Rain drove her knife into where Seven Shades' stomach should be, as black steel parted layers of yellow cloth like rancid butter, and Rain ripped the knife sideways, tore open a great rent in the yellow robes. Her elbow shot back again and she rammed the knife home a second time, slashed across Seven Shades' chest, caught the dangling edges of one sleeve. She stabbed and tore and cut, left ragged tatters trailing in otherworldly wind. It was like assaulting the ocean. Beneath each layer of slashed yellow cloth was just more yellow, more ripples, more infinity. I had warned her. Rain seemed to sense that her fury was spent in vain. She span the knife into a backhand grip and reared up to stab Seven Shades in the face or throat or through an eye. Her face, her throat, her eye, a mirror staring back at her. She couldn't do it, couldn't bring the knife down. Had enough. Sure you want Heather to see this? Seven Shades sighed with an indulgent grin, a knowing grin, Rain's grin. Rain, stop, I hissed. It's pointless. Nah, it's cool, Seven Shades said in Rain's voice, easy and accepting, the very same acceptance Rain gifted to me so often. Get it all out if you need to. Better than beating yourself up, yeah. Oh, oops. Her grin turned cheeky. Knife held in out front like a quivering shield, Rain retreated 2 unsteady steps and bumped into the table, heaving rough breaths through her nostrils, eyes wide and overwhelmed. Her attack had shredded the robes at Seven Shades' belly and chest. Great flaps of yellow fabric hung down, strips dangling askew, loose threads stirred by invisible breeze. I half expected the rippling ocean to close over the bloodless wounds, for the garment to reknit itself, but it just lay naked, cratered and torn. Seven Shades of Sunlight didn't seem to mind. Not like you can actually make me bleed, she told Rain. 'Cause hey, I'm not a real person. I'm real, Rain said. And I'd never heard her so angry. So thin and cold. You are. Seven Shades agreed, with all of Rain's confidence behind her words. You are, Rain, that's the point. But you know what I think? You need a full-blown production to tear down all that messy shit and prove it to your subconscious, so why don't we dash? I said no more tormenting my friends. I snapped, and lost my temper far worse than Rain would ever be capable of. Temptation had almost overwhelmed respect temptation to allow Seven Shades to keep talking. But in the end, I loved Rain more than that. Was this what lay beneath Rain's deflection? Was this a glimpse into her worst fears, as the cruel play and Seven Shades' authorial exposition had been for me? And I was so hungry to see beneath Rain's surface, to understand what bizarre value system had provoked the only explanation I'd gotten that had even come close, her words that still rattled around in my head every night as we lay cuddled up in bed together, that reminded me I knew vanishingly little about this woman who I was deeply, insanely in love with. I do not wish to be surplus to your requirements. But whatever else this was, it was violation. If I had a choice between Rain keeping her secrets forever, or having to watch me stand by as she was filleted and dissected, there was no choice. Seven Shades laughed Rain's good-natured laugh at my anger. Heather, come off it, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few legs, and you know well as I that she'll never dash. Words were dangerous and blades did nothing, but I needed neither to give Seven Shades a rough old time of it. Later, after I'd recovered and had time to think, I suspected that was the only thing I did that surprised her. My threat to unravel her, her appearance before us, her wearing of our faces, even our retreat to the medieval metaphysics room in the first place, all of it had been predicted or stage-managed. We had been directed across the stage to produce a specific effect in our own hearts, all for the sake of drama. Whatever Seven Shades of Sunlight was beneath the masks and the yellow ocean, she did understand human beings and how to manipulate them. But whatever descent she might claim, she did not understand the abyss. We didn't actually fight, so I don't know if I would have won. I doubt it. In retrospect, Seven Shades of Sunlight was older than me, purer, more in control, not a clumsy half-made thing with a foot in both words, but a true amalgam. But I do like to think I could have given her a good slapping. Perhaps I'm just tooting my own horn, as Evelyn might say. But as soon as I made the threat concrete, Seven Shades made herself scarce, which implied she hadn't seen this coming. She ducked her copied head so fast she didn't even have time for a final word. She drew that hood up with sheer force of motion, and simply stepped sideways, out of my path, away from my anger, and vanished. Seven Shades of Sunlight slipped far further backstage than Rain or I could follow, even in my current state. She left us standing alone and shivering in the muted light cast through the blanket curtains of the medieval metaphysics room. And I felt great. It took me several full minutes to come back from what I had done to myself to scare her off. By the time I finally made human response to human stimulus, Rain was frantic with worry. I'd sprouted my full complement of Pneuma-Somatic tentacles, built them in visualization and imagination, anchored them to the deep tissues inside my torso, hooked them to supporting muscle and wrapped their roots snug around my spine and hip bones, made them real with a wrist flick of hyperdimensional mathematics, and unfurled them to encircle 7 shades with a shiver of delicious physical euphoria. Perhaps where a knife had failed, Pneuma-Somatic flesh might peel back the yellow layers, aided by brain math I was on the verge of preparing. But the abyssal euphoria, the sweet relief of being a touch closer to what lay trapped inside my wet meat, triggered a deeper layer of recognition between myself and the yellow interloper. We were alike. And just as I had not really possessed tentacles and fins and gills in the abyss, just as these things were mere approximations reduced to human senses, 7 shades of sunlight was not rippling yellow fabric. So as my tentacles had whipped out to surround 7 shades and she had begun the motion of stepping sideways, I had attempted to see her. I tried to see and hear and smell as I had in the abyss. Another trick of hyperdimensional mathematics, performed without even thinking about it, let alone pausing to consider the implications. A simple switch from 1 to 0, from meat senses of pressure and heat and reflected light, to a sensory suite that I did not even possess in this ape body, indigestible by the soft gray fatty blob inside my fragile bird egg skull. The wrong input flared like lightning across my brain in random arcs of nonsense. But I had another mind, another processor. The abyssal thing in me, it saw. I saw with all the glorious simplicity I had possessed in the abyss. I saw 7 shades of sunlight step sideways, into a fold in reality, the million frills of her trailing skirts an ostentatious display of power and style, yes, style, seen through abyssal senses. Style had not existed out there in the oceanic dark, where there was no role for anything but survival and camouflage and utilitarian phenotype. But here, or outside, what wonders could flourish, when built from abyssal principles? Canary soft frills and lemon sharp grace and butterscotch flesh, or at least, something akin to flesh. There was no face, no hands, no humanity at all, nothing that would be rendered such in human senses. But just for a second, as she slipped away, seen through abyssal eyes and without her masks, 7 shades of sunlight was the kind of inhuman beauty upon which religions are founded. I was not sad to see her leave though, she had tried to hurt my mate. That mattered more, to both ape and abyss. She left, and calm settled, and for a long, quiet moment I just felt, because for the first time in quite a while I felt good to be me. According to Rain, what I actually did was have some kind of fit. Twitching, spluttering, eyes rolling back, suffering one nasty nosebleed. She rammed her knife into the table, point down, and caught me as I flailed at random, making weird little hissing and burbling noises in my throat. I do have vague memories of some indistinct ape nonsense going on at the time, a mouth close to me pushing out gases and flapping meat against meat, but I was too absorbed in seeing the structural truth beneath the world, the clarity and precision in the dance of photon and electron, the stacked beauty in the core of every atom, the mathematical structure that describes reality itself. Here was the very substrate I manipulated with hyperdimensional mathematics, and it was, to abyssal senses, as lovely as a sunrise. At one point I apparently stopped breathing for a full 30 seconds, Rain was on the verge of administering CPR and calling an ambulance. I came back when my body's energy ran out and my tentacles collapsed back into ash. Pain lanced deep into both flanks, then inside my torso in a web of bruising, scraping red-hot pokers, leaving behind nerve compression tingles and a throbbing bone ache. A flash of cold sweat passed over every inch of my skin, and my stomach opened like a black pit in the center of my being. By that time, Rain had set me down in one of the armchairs, which was lucky because otherwise I would have fallen over. The first thing I did as I crashed back into my body was curl up and groan like I had the world's worst stomach ache. Which I kind of did. Heather. Heather, hey, say something, hey. Rain's hands were all over me as She squatted in front of the chair, squeezing my arms and trying to get me to respond. Heather, come on, say dash. Back again, I managed, then groaned a second time. Ow. Hey, you're alright, Rain laughed with relief. Where's the pain, is it serious? Are you bleeding? Heather, I need you to concentrate, tell me where it hurts. Listen to my voice, where does it hurt? I managed to shake my head like a sleepwalker as the tears started, as the awful dysphoria of loss crept over me like a wave of freezing horror at the wrongness of my own body. The dash, I heaved for a breath. The usual. Sorry. Tentacles, and shouldn't have, no, I know dash. Heather, okay, shut up, Rain said, strict but not harsh, and took my face in both hands to raise my eyes. Shut up and look at me. I did as I was told. Rain raised my face and looked into my eyes, her hands so warm against my clammy flesh. She smoothed my hair back from my sweat-soaked forehead and used a tissue to wipe the messy nosebleed off my face. She watched me carefully for so long that if I'd been less wiped out I would have been blushing with self-consciousness. I grumbled. Making sure you're all here, she said with a smile. Now, where does it hurt? Everywhere. Forever. If you've got internal bleeding, I need to get you out of here right now, nothing else matters. Piss robes can harass us in the hospital for all I care. Heather, where does dash? No, I said, and tried to force air into my shuddering lungs. Pain is, normal. I can make tentacles without ripping myself apart. That's not what took. I rewired my senses, I admitted. I didn't know I could do that. Saw 7 Shades for real. Oh yeah? Rain asked. And there's no burning pain, no stabbing pain, nothing like that? I shook my head. She stared into my eyes again, felt my forehead with one hand, pressed 2 fingers to my throat to check my pulse. You seem alright. I think. You're so beautiful, I said, and took a long moment to realize that I'd said it. Course I am, Rain said. I'm your girlfriend, aren't I? Only the best. Then I blushed. I can't dash. She laughed. I would have laughed too if it didn't make my lungs ache, but it still helped. She's gone, right? Rain asked, glancing around as I took difficult sips of water from the bottle she handed me. Piss robes. Rain shot me a grin. Whatever you did, it got her to bugger off right sharpish. Well done. And thanks, by the way. I was kinda losing my shit there. Are you okay, Rain? Yeah. She shrugged and straightened up, still watching my eyes with close attention. Listen, I gotta call Evie, let her know what's happened. Maybe she can bring Lozzie to campus, get her up here to take a look at you. I can walk, just give me 15 minutes. No way. You are not walking all the way home until I'm certain it's safe. I'd carry you, but I'm not sure if I should even move you yet. Just hold up for now, Heather, okay? Wait right there. I took another long sip of water as Rain gingerly left my side, but I was pouring liquid down a borehole. Sustaining Pneuma-Somatic tentacles for 4 or 5 full minutes had drained me to empty, as if I'd run 3 marathons back to back. Low blood sugar cursed me with fragile shaking. If Shang had presented me with a live squirrel right then, would have happily eaten it, bones and all. Rain pulled her knife out of the table and slid it away inside her jacket, then crossed the cozy little space of the medieval metaphysics room to scoop her phone off the floor where she'd dropped it earlier. Hey, no cracks in the screen, she said. Minor miracle there. I need food, I murmured. I am gonna, I made a good faith effort to stand up, but that wasn't happening. My head swam. Oh. Okay then. Whoa, Heather, whoa, take it easy. Rain crossed back to the chair. Doctor's orders, okay. You go bumping around, you might tear something. Here, let's see if I've got anything. She gave her leather jacket a quick pat down, then rummaged through the inside pockets, the ones where she kept dangerous things and dark secrets. Aha, here we go. She produced a rather battered-looking fruit and nut chocolate bar. The wrapper was intact, but it looked like it had been in that pocket since before we'd met. I snatched it when offered, tore the wrapper open, and shoved it into my face. While I embarrassed myself with the table manners of a starving pig, Rain rubbed my shoulder with one hand and called Evelyn with the other. I didn't hear much of the conversation, I was too busy chewing physically, then mentally once the chocolate bar was all gone and I was washing it down with more water, but I gathered that Evelyn was none too pleased. Rain was not allowed to finish a single whole sentence other than, "Hey, Evie, it's me," and Evelyn hung up first. Rain lowered the phone and shot me an ironic grin. "Cavalry's on its way. We're to stay put and you're not to move, or Evie'll use my intestines for bunting." I nodded. "Lozzie too?" Yeah," Rain said, glancing down at the phone. "I think that's what some of the shouting was about. Dr. Lozzie is making a house call, to check you haven't torn your stitches." "First time for her, visiting campus," I croaked. "Hey, don't worry about that. Evie's nothing if not incredibly paranoid, Lozzie'll be safe on the way here. Probably make her hold Preem's hand the whole way." Rain gave my shoulder another reassuring squeeze, then left me again to perform a check of the room. Rather pointless gesture, I thought, considering our uninvited guest could come and go as she pleased, doors be damned, but maybe Rain found the process comforting. She double-checked the door was locked, gave the old racking a once-over, and then peeled back the edge of the blanket curtains to peer out into the thin spring sunlight across the university campus. I watched her, with both admiration and wonder. "How are you not freaking out?" I croaked. "Ah." Rain tucked the blanket curtain back into place. "At everything that just happened, I mean." Rain shot me a grin and shrugged. "'S what I do. Evie asked me the same question once, long time ago now. Couldn't give her a good answer either. Guess I just have strong foundations." I cleared my throat, the iron tang of nosebleeds still in my mouth. I gathered what little scraps of energy remained to me, no better time than the present. We were stuck here without distractions, until the others arrived to make sure I hadn't done myself an internal injury. "Rain," I croaked. "What was that all about?" "Ah." Rain raised her eyebrows. 7 Shades of Sunlight. Cute enough name, sure, but she's no genius play director, just a drama hound. Whatever she showed you back in the lecture hall, don't take it to heart. All the stuff she said in here too, who knows? More like 7 shades of shit stirring, am I right? No, I mean I. Hey, you think she'll try this with Jing too? Imagine how bad that'll go. Who? No, Rain. I mean, what was the doll of you about? What did it mean? What did any of that mean? Rain's grin didn't die, there was no horrifying repeat of her hard stop last week, but her little sigh, the way she wet her lips, the way the paused was enough to send a tremor of fear up my spine. She doubted her own answer. "You are real, right?" I asked. My voice shook in a way I had not intended. "Heather." "Whoa, hey, what?" "Course I'm real, what dash?" 7 Shade said it. One of my worst fears, the words spilled out, shaky and difficult. "About you, about Evelyn, when we first got together, no, before that, when we first met. That you were too good to be true, everything I wanted and needed. I was afraid that I was locked in a padded room back in Signet Children's Hospital, my veins pumped full of drugs, and both of you were just a fantasy, a hallucination. But I know that's not true, I know I'm not mentally ill, at least not in that one specific way. I'm not schizophrenic. But Rain, whatever you are, I accept you. Okay. Whatever that meant, I accept whatever you are. Rain stared at me for a heartbeat too long, then allowed a mischievous grin to creep onto her face. Rain. Rain, I'm being serious. Hey, so am I, accepting me? Well. She did this big theatrical tut and shrugged her shoulders, wandering back to me and perching on the arm of one of the other chairs. That might be extra difficult, Heather. She leaned in closer and closer as she spoke, eyes boring into mine, a grin playing across her lips, exuding all the animal pressure and confident self-assurance that made me melt at her touch. I felt myself shiver, and not in a bad way. Rain, don't dash. Because I'm the worst, nastiest creature you can possibly imagine, she murmured, voice dropping. A nightmare from the depths, a shadow from a million years ago, the most bloodthirsty horror to ever walk this earth. She leaned in all the way, until she filled my vision from horizon to horizon. A human being, she whispered. I huffed hard enough to give myself a sore throat, shuddering with relief and exasperation in equal measure, and narrowly resisted the urge to belt Rain in the face when she burst out laughing. Oh, that is such a ridiculous cliché. I said. There are much worse things than human beings. I should know. Yeah, Rain said through the laughter. But you get my point. Rain. Rain, really. You almost had me going for a moment there, you terrified me. Aha. Rain's eyes twinkled as she dialed down her chuckle. You love it though. I blushed and frowned. Rain, I huffed, blushing rather harder than before. You're doing that thing again. That thing you like. That thing where you use sex to deflect a difficult question. It works because I like it, but please. Went Rain, and to my incredible relief she neither froze up nor found a different way to deflect my actual point. No worries. I am real, I am a human being, and I am really here. Where to begin? Well, first, I was born at a very young age. She cracked another grin, then held up a hand before I could tut. No, seriously. I'm a regular human being. I wasn't put together in Evelyn's old cellar, I'm not a demon host, or a ghost, or a zombie, or anything along those lines. I've never lied to you about where I came from, or what I am. Human, all the ugly bits included. Promise. I'd become quite adept at telling when Rain was deflecting, and how far the deflection went. This was the truth, but it answered nothing. So what did the doll of you mean? I asked. You said, ow, that was pain, I couldn't ignore it, I'm not going to pretend I didn't see. It made me feel really bad for you too, Rain. Rain began to shrug, but then she caught the look in my eyes, the hard squint of curiosity, beneath even the shuddering, hungry exhaustion and the throbbing ache down my flanks and inside my bones. She stopped and had the good sense to look sheepish for a moment, then actually took the time to think about her answer. I respected her for that. She was trying. You can tell me anything, Rain. You do know that, right? Even when I'm like this. She let out a sigh, accompanied by a knowing smile. Yeah. Yeah, course I can. I can, did not mean, I will. 7 Shades showed me literally one of my worst fears, I went first, blinked first. That trying to rescue Maisie is going to get all my friends killed, that I'm using you all, for my own ends, one that's not even going to work. She knew that about me, knew how to hurt me, in here. I tapped my chest with 2 fingers, over my heart, then had to lower my hand because my arm felt like it was going to fall off, the calories from a single chocolate bar had only gone so far. She hurt you the same, even more with the things she said to you. It was an ugly mockery of me, Rain said, a little too fast. That hurt, yeah, you're right, it did. And that's all. Have you heard of imposter syndrome, Heather? A little bit. I get it sometimes, you know. She grinned for me again, all beaming confidence, not the shaking, furious Rain who had lost control of herself and gone berserk at 7 Shades. Fake it, till you make it and all that, and no matter how good you are at something, sometimes you still feel like a bit of a fake, and you're just waiting for everyone to discover, and then they'll think less of you. Course I know it's nonsense, up in my noggin. I'm the best at what I do. No worries, just an ugly old thought she shoved in my face. Now that was a tower shield of deflection, a nuclear disaster sarcophagus of compartmentalization. It wasn't a lie. Rain wasn't lying to me, she hadn't done so in months. I suspect that on some level I had rendered her incapable of lying to me. But 7 Shades had made her angrier than I'd ever seen her, made her lose control, and this explanation did not make sense. But I was exhausted, I was fragile beyond words. At that precise moment I would have gladly traded all Rain's secrets for a roast chicken. All I could think of was, why did you lose your temper with her then? Rain grinned, puzzled. My temper. I did see, Rain, I grumbled, not even trying. I sighed, ready to slump back, preparing a surrender on my lips. If she didn't want to talk about it, she only had to say. I would respect that, if that's what she needed. But to my horror, it almost worked. My life is not a play, she said, with a shadow of that same anger. She didn't direct that anger at me, but off to the side, as if talking to herself. Pure instinct bid me rise from the chair again, to go to her, but my side screamed with pain and my lungs quivered and I only managed to shuffle forward an inch. Rain. I dash. What I am is not a play, not a game, not false. I'm real. Everything I've made of myself is real. I count, I matter. She frowned to herself, harsh and punishing in a way I'd never seen before. You do. Oh, Rain, I said. You matter, of course you do. What is this? Rain, where is this coming from? She looked up at me and a rueful smile returned to her face, natural and unforced. She shrugged. When your formative experience is homelessness, it does things to you. Oh. Oh, Rain, I never thought about. I trailed off in private horror. I could tell when Rain was lying, when she was deflecting, and I like to think I had learned to tell when she believed what she said. She'd just managed to do all three at once. I had no idea what I was looking at. Hey, was that there before? She asked, and snapped me out of it. Rain, don't change the subject, I said. I know you were homeless as a teenager, and it makes my heart ache to think of you like Dash. Heather, hold up, Rain repeated, harder, in serious mode again, fingers raised to stall my sympathy. She got up from the arm of the chair and took a step around the table, her eyes fixed at a spot on the floor. Seriously, was that there before? I had to lean to the right to see what she was indicating. The movement sent a quiver of bruised pain down my flank. A strip of torn yellow cloth. It no longer rippled like an ocean seen from miles up, but lay on the scratchy old carpet like a dead slug, a shriveled scrap of dried flesh, looking as if it might crumble away to nothing when touched. Oh, I breathed. When you cut 7 shades. Yeah, Rain agreed. She slid her knife from her jacket and squatted down in front of the piece of fabric. Maybe from her sleeve, you think? She went to poke it with the tip of her knife. Don't touch it. I hissed. Said she wouldn't hurt me. Yes, but that's not 7 shades, that's a part of her body, I suppose. I shivered as I recalled what I'd seen behind the veil of human senses, and not in disgust. Do not touch it, Rain. It could be dangerous. Wait for Evie to get here. Right you are then, boss. Rain stood up, put her knife away, and stepped carefully back from the outsider material. Evie'll know what to do. I sighed heavily, a lump growing in my throat. Actually, I don't think she will. I don't think anybody knows what to do with all this. About all this. About what I saw. Heather. Now I'd gotten some answers from Rain, as piecemeal and confusing as they'd been. The weight of 7 Shades' prediction settled on my shoulders once more. Evelyn would get here soon, maybe in the next 10 minutes, and I'd have to tell her. I have to tell her everything, I said out loud, staring down at my hands limp in my lap. I have to tell everyone, all of it. That I'm going to be the death of them if they keep following me. The death of you. Everyone has to know, I can't do this to Lazi either, or Zheng, or any dash. Tell me first, then. Rain's tone almost made me sob. She sat down in the nearest armchair, reached over to take my hand in hers, and took me completely seriously. If she hadn't been there, I think I would have curled up in a ball. And I am an idiot, because that was all it took for me to accept any amount of deflecting she'd done earlier. Tell me about the play again, she said. Before, you were rushing, tripping over your own words. I got the gist of it, but gimme the details. However grisly. Come on, I can take it. Take anything for you. So I did. While we waited for Evelyn and Lazi to turn up to ensure I hadn't torn another hole in my lungs or my guts, I told Rain exactly what I'd seen on stage, and why it mattered. And I'm too weak, I sniffed. You're so devoted, but I can't ask for that when I don't even have a plan. Last I checked, you had a pretty rad plan. I shook my head. Looking for books to make us invisible to the eye. What's the point? 7 shades, oh blast, whatever she is, she was right. I can't ever fight the eye. It's like planning to fight I don't know, the sun. A black hole. What does fight even mean in that context? I shrugged, wanted to cry but couldn't, too exhausted from summoning my tentacles. I don't understand what 7 shades meant. What else can I do with brain math? Even tiny things make me bleed from my face like a stuck pig. You can give yourself tentacles. That's working. I managed a weak smile. And? Growing tentacles is like Evelyn's artificial leg. It works, functions, but it'll never be real. They looked pretty real to me, that one time I saw them, Rain said. She cracked a grin. Pretty cool, too. Thank you. Thank you, Rain. But they're not real. They're only an approximation. And look, how would they even help? I could no more defeat the eye with a few tentacles than I can in this. I gestured at my own body, and suddenly felt weird phrasing it that way. Alienated from my own flesh. Maybe. Maybe not. Rain was peering at me in an odd way, with a twinkle in her eyes. Didn't you just tell me you rewired your senses? That's new. I shrugged. Suppose so. It was beautiful. It was. And 7 shades was so, I began to choke up. It had been beautiful, to see like that, my place in reality had made more sense. But next to 7 shades of sunlight I was a mewling, crippled thing, dredged from the depths and asphyxiating on the shore. Hey, have I gotta be jealous of her too? Rain cracked a cheesy grin. No, oh don't be silly. I sniffed hard, managed a tiny laugh. That was better. Rewiring my senses was nice, but it gave me a fit. If you hadn't been here I would have brained myself. What's the point, how does that help? You've done miracles before, Heather. Everything you do is a miracle. You just have to find the right way. I sighed heavily, shaking my head. Yes. Miracles, right. I saved Sarika, that was a miracle, but I had to leave my body to do that. If I go again, I don't think I'll come back. That's what Maisie said. Are you certain Maisie's right about that? Rain, don't, I whispered, urgent and hard. You can't say that to me, you can't tempt me like that. I want it, but no, I'd never save her that way. You'd never see me again either, I'd go. I took a huge, shuddering breath. Why am I even trying? I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I tried to thump the opposite arm of the chair with my fist, but my arms were still shaky and weak with exhaustion. And I know I'm going to try it anyway. Even if you don't come with me, even if none of you come with me. I will still go to Wonderland, I will still try. Hey, Heather, I believe in you, I believe you can do this. Maybe you shouldn't. I don't know what I'm doing. Rain, you don't have to dedicate yourself to a lost cause. Evelyn said exactly the same thing to me, once. Rain shrugged. Same tone of voice, even. She was a lost cause, nothing left, given up on herself for dead. But she didn't die. I played a little part, sure, but it was more because she decided to fight. I puffed out a humorless laugh. You make it sound so easy. Like a fairy tale. Just have faith, is that your secret technique, Rain? Grace. Friendship. Solidarity, Rain echoed Seven Shades' words. Those seemed like pretty clear clues to me. Oh Rain, it's not a riddle, it's never that simple, reality is never that simple. Because magic isn't a science, I murmured. Evie taught me that. Maybe not for mages. But for you? Who's to say you can't do actual theory? I blinked several times and pulled away from Rain's hand, which was a testament to how mad the idea sounded. I can barely read my own notebooks on hyperdimensional mathematics without being violently sick, I said. How am I supposed to do theory? Rewire your senses? I stared at her for a long moment, then at the floor, then at my hands. I mean, it's just a suggestion, she went on. I'm spitballing, throwing stuff at the wall until Seven Shades pops back up and I can tell her to shove herself up her own arse. You've got a problem, and I'll do everything in my power to feed you ideas to help solve it. Hell, if I could read the notebooks for you, I would. I will be your eyes, Heather, I will be your hands, if I can. I looked back up at her. You really mean that, don't you? She nodded. Well then my hands, you may resume rubbing the back of my neck, please, while I think about how to rewire my senses without either giving myself a seizure, or giving Evelyn cause to have us both tied up. Anything for you, Rain purred.